Right now, we are losing a football field worth of wetlands every hour.
Jonathan Henderson monitors oil and gas activity in the wetlands for the Gulf Restoration Network. He showed us just how damaging industry activity has been to the region.
This is ground zero for where drilling started in Louisiana. Everything that you see here that is open water was once just solid wetlands.
In the search for oil and gas, canals were carved through the wetlands, mainlining salt water straight into freshwater marshes, killing everything in its path. This has caused Louisiana to lose more land faster than any other place in the world.
If you go up in the air, you can see that this is the clearest example of an oil field in wetlands because there's so many oil and gas canals.
Jonathan offered to take us up to get a better view of how the 10,000 miles of canals have eaten away at the marsh.
This central area over there, that used to be a huge cypress forest.
Looks like a lake.
Looks like a lake. All that's left are the stumps of cypress trees now.
As we flew further out, we spotted dozens of offshore facilities.
You can see all these wells that are out there in the water.
Oh, yeah.
Those all had to be built, right? And so they had to dredge to get in there and then lay pipelines to connect them.
Even with a glut in the global supply of oil and prices at their lowest rates in years, the offshore industry is still going strong. That's in part because energy companies are playing a long game in the hopes that what goes down must go up, investing in projects that will run for decades to come. The area is expected to produce a record 1.9 million barrels a day starting next year.
My name is Kade Parker. This is Kade and Dillon. We talked to you today about coastal erosion.
All right, coastal erosion is a local problem with a global impact. The purpose of this presentation is to raise awareness of the issues surrounding coastal erosion and to suggest solutions to save the coastline of Louisiana. According to Louisiana's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, the state is slated to lose up to 1,700 square miles of coastline over the next 50 years. Man-made contributions to this issue, like dredging canals for oil and gas pipelines and the creation of artificial levees and spillways, only exacerbate the ever-growing problem. If left unaddressed, the ecological impact will be catastrophic to the local wildlife and economy of Louisiana. If we can look to this figure, the satellite imagery from 1973, you can see a great loss of the wetlands along the Mississippi River. The causes and contributing factors are very numerous, the main correlation being climate change. This correlation is unmistakable. Rising sea levels and ever-intensifying storm patterns create a cascading effect to vulnerable areas. Louisiana has seen a sea level rise of 8 feet over the past 50 years, which is twice the global average. Man-made interference with coastal areas worsen the problem even further. Oil and gas companies dredge canals and inlets in order to move heavy platforms offshore. The greatest threat comes from the storm surge of powerful hurricanes, most notably Hurricane Katrina, which in recent memory was very catastrophic. With no buffer from wetlands, powerful waves directly impact residential areas and commercial areas to a devastating effect. And now on to the stats. I'll give it over to Kyle Bacon.
Coastal erosion is probably one of the biggest problems we're having in Louisiana right now. While it doesn't affect us directly, at least at the moment, since we're not directly on the coastline, it's going to eventually if things proceed the way they are. Lafayette has the highest concentration of oil and gas workers in the state. If we were to get something like Hurricane Rita that hit us from the west, the effects would ripple across the United States, and that's an understatement. The Gulf of Mexico actually has half of the offshore oil refineries in the nation. 90% of the pipelines in the Gulf of Mexico are pipelines that give offshore energy production to us. And coastal erosion is eating away at the foundations under these pipelines. Now, if things were to proceed as they are presently, about 2 million people would end up having to relocate. And in such a predominantly oil-driven area, that wouldn't be the best thing, right? Alongside that, Louisiana is a very commercial fishing heavy place, and things like oysters, blue crabs, and shrimp, they require the coastline to be able to nurse their young. The young need these places as a nursery. Now, if nothing is done about how the coastline is eroding at present day, the LSU Economics and Research Policy Group actually found that in the next 50 years, the state of Louisiana will be cost $3.6 billion in damages. That's a lot of money to make up. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Group, Scientific Group, saw that over the next 100 years, once we hit about 2100, the year 2100, the sea level is going to end up rising about 4.3 feet, and across all of the Gulf of Mexico, that's about a 3-foot elevation. That's enough to put most of southeast Louisiana underwater. If we don't do something now, chances are the place we're in right now is going to be underwater. Something needs to be done. And so, just to be able to tell you guys what needs to be done, I'm going to hand it off to Dillon Berry, who's going to give you solutions and companies that can help with this problem.
Louisiana's eroding coastline poses very real threats to the industries like the oil and gas and commercial fishing. But there are also more than 10,000 people simply living along the disappearing coastline. Alongside the state's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, the CPRA, there are more than a dozen nonprofits organizations focused on coastal restoration. Only one group acknowledges another option in its name. Simone Mallows is an executive director for a nonprofit restore or retreat operation. Despite the name, the group focuses on coastal restoration. The retreat part of the name was meant as a warning code to restore or retreat. Now that I've told you one of our options, which is not really one of our more famous or most reliable options, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we can do as a community and as individual businesses, and then I'm going to tell you something that you can do as a human being yourself. One solution that we can use is pile driving. Pile driving is simply a process to where you take a large crane with a barge and you take steel or sheet or wood pilings, and it uses this crane to slam them into the ground. Once they're into the ground, when the water comes up, it hits against the steel, the wood, or whatever it may be, to prevent erosion from happening on the soft, earthy material. It's just against something that's got a backbone and can be replaced easily. Dredging. Dredging is another option that you can use. It takes silt and spoil and unwanted mud and debris off the bottom of your waterways and sets them onto the bank, which raises the elevation to where as the waves come through and erode the side of the bank, the spoil from the top of the levee or spillway that you may say falls back into place. So it takes longer for the erosion process to happen. I got most of my sources from the Berry Brothers website for pile driving and dredging, but there's multiple different companies that we could reach out to perform the task. Another one is erosion control mats. You see them driving down the highway. You look off to your left and you say, why do they have hay bales rolled out or hay thrown all out on the side of the highway? Well, it's because it's freshly disturbed ground and it keeps the water from running across the dirt really fast and eroding it away. Well, we could use this along our coastlines for when the huge waves are crashing on it. It's crashing against the hay which is much cheaper to produce and to lay out than rebuilding the earth. And this is our references.